What a tour we have been on. So we started in the morning, cardiovascular obesity. We then continued on to neuroscience, and then ended now just also with a very interesting panel on discussing digital biomarkers in immunotherapy and women's health. We're now going to shift gears a bit and take some themes that cut across all of these disease areas. Namely, we will be looking at how do we think about incorporating the patient perspective into what we measure and how we go about measuring that in clinical trials. So we'll have a couple of different perspectives that we'll hear about in a moment, and as well as a panel. And then we'll end on taking a look at the regulatory state of affairs. Where do we stand? How has the environment shifted? I've been told that at this time, we're sort of in the graveyard shift, and so I want to counteract that by giving our first speakers a round of applause that demonstrates the energy that is in the room. Now, before you applaud, I'm going to quickly call them out. So Ieuan Clay, Director of Science at Vivosense, and Stijn Rogiers, Head Data Integration and Standards at Argenx. And they will be looking at how we approach unlocking the value of patient-centered digital measures. So let's give them a loud, energetic round of applause. Woo!
One time more? Very good. Thank you very much for the warm, not sleepy welcome. So hi everybody, my name is Ieuan Clay from Vivosense. So Vivosense is a wearable sensor CRO. We offer a very large range of services that really goes from everything you need up front, that includes strategy, design, planning, through execution, data collection, and then everything you need afterwards. So analysis, reporting, regulatory interaction. And today we're going to talk a little bit with our partners from Argenx about some quite extensive work that we've been doing with them and show you some of our exciting results together. Yeah, the green.
Okay, so who knows Argenx? Hands up in here. Ooh, well, that's good, that's good. So we're fairly a young biotech company. We had the first submission approved by FDA in 2021. I joined the company 3 years ago. I'm, as was mentioned, head of data integration and standards. So it's all about collecting data, bringing data, being in the center of a lot of other functions. And we're growing quite intensively. When I joined 3 years ago, we were with 700, I think, and now already more than 2,500 in less than 3 years. And there is quite an extensive pipeline ahead of us. So the challenge we have is how do we do that, correct? We're getting from top level saying we're not going to grow that extensively the coming years. Might a little bit, but not like we did the past 3 years. So how are we going to be extremely, use that innovation spirit, think out of the box to handle that pipeline that is coming our way, but still with maybe a little bit more people, but not like with 2 or 3 times the double amount of people, correct? So that's why that innovation is very critical. Rooted in science, everything that is done in Argenx is really with a science-driven mindset. Yeah? And we have, of course, our own pipeline. We have also collaborations. I mentioned already efgartigimod, which we have on the market. We have also EMPA and Argenx 119 in the pipeline, and some others that, of course, we cannot share. And then on the right-hand side, Vyvgart, that's the formal name of the drug on the market, approved for 3 indications, GMG, CIDP and ITP in Japan, and 50,000 patients. I will come back in the next slide here, because this is the Vision 2030. This is for us very important, quite a bold mission vision. We want to have 5 new molecules in phase 3. This is not the ones that we have today already in phase 3. It's new ones by 2030, so that's already been 5 years, I think, from now. We have 10 labeled indication we want to have on the market, and from 10K that we have today to 50K of patients. Now, you might think like oncology and other areas, 50K, what is that? That's nothing. But we're in rare and ultra-rare diseases. So 50K patient is a lot of patients in this kind of area. So setting the scene. For our presentation today that I will do indeed together with Ieuan, we'll focus on this kind of stream. We will start a little bit with explaining how we did it the wrong way when I joined the company. how we made a strategic shift and how we planned for that, how we looked into that together with, of course, bringing a partner on board, how we are now looking into a fully digital strategy on an asset and a cross-asset level, and then also bringing it to the indication level. And then today there was a lot of mentioned like it's a long-term, correct, before you have value from a digital endpoint that you maybe want to create. So how can you generate on the long way that we are all on, how can you generate value, correct? Is it for payers? Is it maybe for reducing the burden on the patient in the meantime? Is it for decision making? There is a lot of value that you can create already along the way, and that's also something we are, of course, looking into. I will, before I hand, can I go back? Yeah, okay. So before I hand over the mic to Ieuan, I mentioned a bit like it didn't start on the right way. So when I joined, and also Kim there in the audience that you can speak to later, on the clinical operations side, we had already one of the trials implemented actigraphy and more digital health technologies, but that was not implemented the right way. It was not thought over. There was no strategy. There was no monitoring, no follow-up. So you can understand all the problems that arise from that trial. And that's why we said, okay, we need a hold. We need to do it the right way. We need to do a quality by design from the start because we are intensively growing. So let's do it the right way. And now we still can. We are a very young company, so we can do it in the right way. And that's what the talk will also be about.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, so really fundamental to our work together has been the realization that you need to have end-to-end connected thinking for how you're approaching digital measures and digital evidence. And I think we've all seen enough examples where if there's one weak link in that chain, it doesn't really matter how well you're doing the rest, but you're not going to get value at the end of the day. And you see poorly designed studies, doesn't really matter how good your data handling is after that. We've seen plenty of examples of where your site management is not great, your data cleaning is not great, and you don't get the quality that you need to then be able to do your analysis downstream. And yeah, I think we've seen enough examples of where someone gets shoehorned in to analyzing data that maybe they're very unfamiliar with. And so this was really a big part of our thinking of how we approach this and how we do all of our work. And we're very aware that we want to make sure that at the end of the day, there is value for that sponsor. And we want to make sure that that client is getting value for what they're doing. And so we're going to talk through today in these 3 different sections about what we've been doing together.
Okay. So one thing we needed to do when we got started was establish a team. And many people talked today already about there are multiple facets of stakeholders along the way that you need to involve and make sure that they're involved. Not going to name them all, but Kim and I are from bottom up, again, a cultural value pillar of Argenx. It was not that management decided like, oh, we are going to put a digital health technology team together. No, it was bottom up. We saw issues. We got together with a team, cross-functional team. We made sure we had everyone there on the table, made a kind of a project charter to management, to our executive leadership, and said, look, this is what we think needs to happen, presented it, got a green light, and moved on. That's a bit the Argenx way. Of course, we had objectives, deliverables, scoping in, scoping outside, what can we achieve, what can we not achieve. And it's not like we are a governance board, that every study team, that every indication team needs to come to know, but we are a kind of an advisory team with a lot of knowledge around the table, so that we can help, and also before they go to management for approvals, etc., for fundings, for trials where they want to implement digital health technology, that they can come back to us and for advice. Together with Vivosense, we are also establishing a kind of a cooking book, a kind of a playbook, where we are trying all the learnings that we have from all the trials that are happening already on the indications and assets level. We are trying to bring that back into a kind of a cooking book, so that if there tomorrow other trial teams are starting, that they don't need to reinvent the wheel again, that they can immediately start from the lessons learned from the previous trials. Of course, we want to look at the bigger picture. Yeah? Many things were mentioned today. We are talking about meaningful aspects of health, very critical. Is it what's meaningful for our patient population, correct, in the asset level, in the indication level? We start always from that, with that mindset, correct? Then looking to the market, what's already available? Where are the potential gaps that there are in the market that maybe we can fill in and that we can prove added value towards authorities and towards patients, of course. And then looking at technology and looking at recommendations for the indication level and for the study level. So we have applied this on, this is just an example of one of the assets, but we applied it across different assets and the entire pipeline actually. where we looked into a meaningful aspect of health, for example, fatigue and fatigability, two crucial topics, both on, and you see it on the top right corner there, both on a ePro level, also on many topics were talked about today about in-clinic assessments with sensors as well, and then of course sensors also remotely. So to look at the three aspects together, we try now to design that for all the upcoming studies where it's applicable, of course. And then opportunities at the analytical validation and the clinical validation along the way that we need to start thinking about, as well as the regulatory perspective that we will be talking about a bit later. So I mentioned the global approach. And of course, from that global approach that we established across the asset level, you need to take it again back and go to your indication and study level. So we piloted from that, we piloted in Q3, Q4 2024 our first study with that new approach, with that strategic approach, doing it the right way. Soon after, we start scaling to other indications. So we have multiple studies with that same approach in mind. And recently, we start analyzing quite exciting study data from the first analysis now that we are actually now also planning to start already early on. Again, many people are mentioning how can you get as early on with regulators, FDA, EMA. So we're looking at the portfolio discussions with EMA also, bringing that in already the first insights from those trials and talking with them on really asset level, on a portfolio level, to get them on board and get their thinking very early on actually. The same with FDA. I will give back the mic to Ieuan.
Great, thank you. So yeah, just now a few highlights of how we've taken that global strategy and started to put it into practice. And as was mentioned, starting from meaningful aspects of health is something that we should all be very familiar right now, but actually putting it into practice is a challenge. And we have robust processes now, and Argenx have invested heavily into patient voice meetings, for example, to really understand from the lived experience what would represent a meaningful improvement for the patient groups we're working with. And here's a typical example of what we're seeing. So as was mentioned, the entire portfolio heavily focused on neuromuscular disorders. And one of the things that we've heard a lot from patients is particularly around movement and particularly this aspect of fatigue and fatigability. So these patients are often struggling with their overall volume of activity, but also with performing higher levels of activity. So they're really avoiding strenuous activity. They're struggling to recover from strenuous activity, things like this. And so this is one opportunity that we felt that digital could really add value, because this is something that currently we do struggle to measure objectively and to support the other tools that we have in that space. And one of the measures that we are going to focus on today is the idea of best natural effort. And so this is analogous to stride velocity 95th centile, where we're looking at periods, very small periods of activity within the overall real-world data that characterize the small periods of time where that person is maximally active. And we're deriving measures from that characterize how these patients are dealing with situations that would otherwise cause them fatigue and fatigability. But clearly, we need to base this on a foundation of good quality data. And something that we've seen in our work previously before we started working with Argenx is that study oversight is really a critical component of that. And these are some examples of studies where we've been involved in where either the sponsor has implemented study oversight or has not. And by study oversight, we mean live interaction with the data, with the sites, and giving feedback to the sponsors. And we see that the percentage of valid days and the quality of that data really grows when we have that in place. And here's an example from some of the work that was going on an ongoing study with Argenx, where at the start of the study, of course, there are a few hiccups, right? It's a complex protocol, but we're getting feedback from the sites, we're updating processes, and we're putting in place things that are addressing those issues as they occur. And now, for many months, stably, we're seeing very few data issues. And that gives us a good basis to start doing the analysis and start to think about, okay, now we have quality data, how do we create value? And so I mentioned these best natural effort measures. And as I said, it's really focusing down into those small periods where the person is maximally active. So this would be, for example, like one day where they are starting to move around in the morning and maybe they're active in the evening. And we will identify that period where they are most active. So usually breaking that down into a couple of minutes. And from that, we're then deriving descriptive measures which characterize that period of time. And we believe this is not just a reflection of their peak activity, but also this is very sensitive. You know, we're really getting rid of a lot of noise, and we are very confident that we'll be able to move this forward with regulators because of the predicates that we have, for example, like with stride velocity 95th centile. And we've started to look into some of the analytical validity and understanding what these measures actually tell us. So this is taking data from one of these neuromuscular populations. And as you can see, this is the activity broken down into bouts of different lengths. And you can see that almost all of their activity is skewed heavily into these bouts of 10 seconds or less. So these are very ill patients. Even walking for longer than 10 seconds is causing them discomfort, and they are avoiding it. But when we look at how that distribution with the best natural effort measured goes, we see that these measures are actually characterizing not just the distribution of their activity, but also their volume. So the plot in the middle shows you, for example, the yellow line. This is patients with relatively high best natural effort, and they have a relatively even distribution of bout lengths, whereas those with very low best natural effort are really extremely skewed towards these very short bouts. But it also captures, in the plot on the right, a very good representation of their overall activity volume. And so we're really excited with these measures and wanted to start to look at how they relate to other measures, other clinical measures within these studies. And so, as I say, this is a neuromuscular populations. And so if you look at just simple activity volume, so things like step count, we do see the expected relationships. You know, we see that overall, generally, we're seeing the kind of correlations we would expect to see with either improving or decreasing muscle weakness, functional limitations, physical health, and so forth. But when we compare those PROs, those established PROs, to the kind of measures that we're deriving from best natural effort, you can see that the correlations are both stronger and more consistent. And this is why we're really confident in these measures and excited to see what it actually means when we start looking at treatment effects. Because of course, this is a key value for any sponsor, is to understand, is my intervention having an effect? And we're summarizing here all of the different measures that we have in the trial. So this is including traditional clinical outcomes, as well as all the digital measures collected in the real world. And what we're summarizing it as is the overall effect size versus the significance of that effect size. And as you can see, for those patients who are improving, we see very significant and stable responses from the digital measures. And actually, they are outperforming the established measures, which for us was a fantastic opportunity to show the value of these measures and to be really confident that they were consistent with everything else that we were seeing. They were a good basis for decision making and added to the overall packet of evidence that we were collecting in these trials. And this is some of the information that we're going to be taking forward now to regulators. But I'll leave it to Stijn to wrap up.
Seems we were too quick because we have more than 3 minutes still. So, key takeaways. First of all, I think this is just a start. You have seen these are first results. We have some more exciting things, but we can't share them, unfortunately. Hopefully next year we will be back on stage with more graphs, more results. We're really hoping to share that, like it was today asked. Share, please, with each other and make that happen, that we accelerate the entire digital endpoint development. But I think a few things that we can already say that we're trying to do is start from a strategy, correct? Don't just apply it on a study by study to study. Think about it from a full portfolio level. So look at your entire portfolio, look at your asset levels. How can we develop things that are maybe across asset or maybe even beyond the asset level to other assets? So that's where the strategy comes in. An end-to-end approach, like Ieuan was saying already. Don't just look at, the algorithms, but look at everything, correct? The compliance, the monitoring, the algorithms, the communication with regulators from the start. And that's really fitting well with our next thing is the partnership. So at Argenx, we try, the motto is like everything that we can work with partners, we need to do with partners. So that's really strong, and that's why it fits in that Argonauts DNA, like team, form the right team and not individual, but work as a team together internally and externally. And then last but not least, of course, I mentioned it already, is very early interactions with regulators. Yeah? So we're now already at the moment saying, okay, these exciting data that we have, we're going to bring it up into our portfolio discussions with EMA. We're going to maybe bring it up also with FDA. So all of these discussions are happening. And of course, there is value because we're working in rare and ultra-rare disease where often there is nothing available today yet. Or even the outcomes measures that are there today are questionable or not available. So there is really a high need, a high unmet need in those areas that we are, of course, facing. Yeah. So I think this was everything. So I hope this gives a little bit an idea where we are today. It's a little bit inspirational. And if there are any questions, feel free to come to Ieuan, myself, Kate, I see there sitting, or Kim in the audience. So we're happy to further discuss with you. Thank you.
Indeed, are there any questions from the audience right now, since we have a bit of time?
Thank you, guys. Excellent work. I'm wondering whether you can elaborate a little bit on this. What's best natural effort? Is it just like 95th percentile of anything, or is it your secret recipe?
You can come and talk to us afterwards and we'll... No, so it is analogous, I would say, to stride velocity 90th percentile, except rather than in that case where you're looking at the whole distribution of a specific score, we're identifying periods of maximal activity. And as we mentioned, like, those periods are extremely meaningful to this patient group. Like, that's exactly what they're struggling with. And that's why we're focusing a lot of our effort around characterizing those periods of time. And so you locate the period of highest activity and then derive parameters from that. And that's what we're then using as digital measures in the analysis.
One more question? Oh, here.
Talking about the peak activities, have you qualified these activities? What the patients do at these moments specifically? Why are they so active?
It's just part of their everyday behavior. You know, it's in terms of like, you know, everybody has peaks and troughs during the day, but a specific behavior that these patients have talked to us about is that they avoid periods of strenuous activity, and if they have to do it for whatever reason, you know, walk to the shops, say, they will break it up into smaller efforts. And so locating and characterizing those periods of time, you know, is really, really important for us.
All right. Thank you so much for that insightful presentation.